Poor girl agreed to 1 month as his assistant, but the millionaire CEO couldn't let her go. Before we begin, let us know in the comments which country you're watching from, and once the story ends, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Enjoy the story. The letter that changed him. He held her resignation letter like it weighed more than any skyscraper he'd ever built. 30 days. That's all she promised him. 1 month to fill in as his assistant, and then she'd be gone. He thought it would be simple. She was temporary, replaceable, a name on a contract. But somewhere between her morning coffees, her stubborn ideas, the way she looked him in the eye, like she didn't care about his title or his money, she became his piece. And now, with her final words typed in perfect font and signed with quiet goodbye, he realized something no boardroom ever taught him. You can build empires, but if she walks away, you have nothing. And the only question left was, would he let her leave, or would he finally fight for something that wasn't business? The 1 month that broke him, he'd built towers of steel, signed contracts worth millions, stared down the most powerful men in New York, and never blinked. But tonight, Henry Mitchell stood alone 42 stories above the city that once bowed to him, holding a resignation letter with trembling hands. Her letter, "Dear Mr. Mitchell," the words were professional, composed, just like her. But as he read them, he could still hear her voice warm, clear, with that quiet fire that had unsettled him since the moment she walked into his life. It had only been 30 days. 30 days of coffee cups placed beside his desk before he could ask, of soft humming while she sorted files, like his penthouse office had a soul again, of her eyes brown, steady, meeting his across meetings, arguments, deadlines, and silences, and never once looking away. He hadn't meant to notice her. He hadn't meant to need her. But now, standing in the echo of everything she left behind, her scent still lingering like spring on his suit, he felt it. He would burn everything he'd built if it meant she'd come back. And yet, she was leaving because he never told her to stay. He closed his eyes, forehead resting against the cold glass, the city lights below, blurring into something distant and meaningless. 1 month ago, she was just a name on a resume. Now she was the only person who'd ever dared to see through his walls. And she hadn't just walked through them, she'd dismantled them. He'd spent his life avoiding vulnerability, controlling everything, winning, always winning, except now. Now, he might be losing the only thing that ever made him feel alive. He read the last line of her letter again. "I wish you continued success in all your endeavors." And something inside him shattered, because for the first time in his life, success wasn't what he wanted. He wanted her, but to understand how a man like Henry Mitchell could fall completely, devastatingly, for a woman who never asked for his heart, we have to go back to the moment she walked into his office with trembling hands and tired eyes, and turned his entire world inside out. Chapter 1. The interview that changed everything. The blazer was borrowed. The shoes were 2 years old. But Kiara Davis stood in front of her cracked bathroom mirror, back straight, voice steady. Today had to go right. She adjusted the deep burgundy collar one more time. It made her look strong, not desperate, and tried not to think about the unpaid bills stacked beside the sink. Her phone buzzed, a text from Tyler. "You've got this. Just be you." She smiled at the screen, then tapped it dark. Her little brother believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. But belief didn't pay tuition, or rent, or the price of starting over. The train ride from Brooklyn to Midtown felt like crossing into another life, one where buildings gleamed, where shoes never scuffed, where no one asked how you were doing unless it was networking. And still, she walked into the marble lobby of Mitchell Properties like she belonged there. Even if her knees disagreed, the receptionist barely looked up. He's running late. Sit over there. And good luck. You'll need it. He's been through 4 assistants in 6 months. Kiara took the seat, smoothing her skirt, pretending her hands weren't shaking. Through the glass walls, she saw him. Henry Mitchell, Manhattan's most elusive real estate tycoon, a self-made billionaire who'd built towers from nothing but ambition and grit. Tall, clean lines, sharp edges, a man who looked like he didn't blink, unless it was strategic. He stood with his back to her, phone pressed to his ear, suit jacket pulled tight across broad shoulders. Even from a distance, he radiated power. Then he turned, and their eyes met. Just for a moment, his were a shade of green, so piercing she forgot to breathe. Not because they were beautiful, but because they were focused, not on her resume, not on her shoes, or her hair, or her borrowed blazer. On her. She looked away first, but the moment hung in the air like a breath neither of them had taken. A minute later, the receptionist's phone buzzed. He'll see you now. She stepped into his office like it was a test she'd already failed. Henry didn't look up right away, his pen moving fast across a contract. Kiara stood still, spine straight. 5 years in high school classrooms had taught her how to hold her ground, even when teenage hormones and hallway drama exploded all around her. "See, Mr. Mitchell," she said, her voice warm but firm. He looked up, and the world tilted. His green eyes were even more intense up close, his jawline sharp, his mouth unsmiling, and yet Kiara felt something shift in the room, like the air had thickened. He gestured to the seat in front of him. "Miss Davis, please, sit." She passed him her portfolio. Their fingers brushed, a flash of something electric. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He opened her resume. Former high school literature teacher, bachelor's from Columbia, master's from NYU. Excellent references. So tell me, Miss Davis, why does someone with your qualifications want to be an assistant? Her eyes didn't flinch. "Because I need the work. But more than that, I want to prove I can thrive in a role that challenges everything I've built in myself." He didn't smile, but something softened. "And what makes you think you can work for me?" he asked, setting the folder aside. "I've been told I'm difficult." She tilted her head slightly. "I've taught high school Shakespeare to heartbroken seniors during college application season. I can handle one difficult CEO. That did it." The corner of his mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but the first crack in the armor. "Touché," he said quietly. They talked for 20 more minutes. About pressure, expectations, organization. But beneath it all was something else, neither of them named. When he finally offered her the position, she blinked. "You're hiring me?" she asked softly. "Starting Monday, 1-month contract. You'll report directly to me. Long hours, no hand-holding. I don't need my hand held, Mr. Mitchell." His eyes dropped to her hands for a heartbeat too long. "No," he murmured. "You don't." He stepped closer. The scent of his cologne was subtle clean, masculine, expensive. "I expect absolute discretion," he added. "You'll be privy to confidential information, personal schedules, sensitive negotiations. That information stays here. Understood, of course. And one more thing." He looked down at her hand in his again, his grip firm, steady. "I don't do personal relationships with employees. This is strictly business." It was meant to be a boundary, but it felt like a warning. Still, she nodded. "I wouldn't expect anything else." He released her hand, but his thumb had lingered just a second too long. Back in the hallway, the receptionist raised her brows. Kiara simply said, "I start Monday." Then walked toward the elevator on legs that suddenly felt unsteady. 42 floors above her, Henry Mitchell stood in his office, the door now closed. His hand rested on the portfolio she'd left behind. Not because of what was in it, but because of what it made him feel. She hadn't smiled too much. She hadn't tried to charm him. She hadn't batted her lashes or complimented his reputation. She'd just been herself. And now, for the first time in a long time, he felt like someone had actually seen him. And that was dangerous. He hired her for convenience. But even before she said yes, she'd already begun to change everything. Chapter 2. Coffee, Chaos, and First Sparks. Monday, 7/28. Kiara Davis stood outside the towering glass walls of Mitchell Properties, holding two things: a leather portfolio once owned by her father, and a coffee cup filled with precisely black, no sugar from Romano's, just the way Margaret said he liked it. The moment the elevator opened, she stepped into a new life. Margaret, Henry's weary assistant of 5 years, greeted her with a brisk nod. "Welcome to the Lion's Den. You get bonus points for showing up early and with coffee." They moved quickly through orientation, office systems, meeting logistics, an impossibly complex schedule that looked more like battlefield strategy than business planning. He doesn't eat lunch unless someone forces him. He hates small talk. He likes answers, not feelings. And if he's stressed, Margaret sighed, the building can feel it. At 8:30, right on cue, Henry Mitchell emerged from his office like a storm front rolling in. Hair slightly mussed, tie loosened, eyes sharp. He stopped the moment he saw her. "Miss Davis." The air between them pulsed. "Ready for trial by fire?" he asked. Taking the coffee without asking, she smiled. "Bring it on, Mr. Mitchell." And just like that, the day began. By 10:00 a.m., she'd coordinated calls with city planners, reviewed architectural contracts, rescheduled 3 meetings, and discovered a $40 hours work mine financings than a year's discrepancy in a budget line for environmental compliance. She printed the corrected estimate and walked it into his office. He glanced at it, then at her. "You caught this." In an hour, he leaned back, the paper forgotten. "My last assistant missed things like this for months." She didn't blink. "I'm not your last assistant." That made him pause. Then his voice dropped. "No," he said. "You're definitely not." At noon, she noticed him rubbing his temples, jaw clenched. His coffee cup had long since gone cold. Without asking, she ordered lunch from the Italian place Margaret recommended. 20 minutes later, she walked into his office, carrying a brown bag. "What's this?" he asked, eyeing it suspiciously. "Fuel. You can't run an empire on coffee and pride." "I don't have time for lunch." "You do now. Sit, eat, or collapse your choice." He didn't move, just stared at her like she was rewriting the rules of his day. "You're very bossy for someone who's been here 4 hours. I prefer proactively helpful." Is that what we're calling it?" She unwrapped the food and pushed it toward him. "You don't need to impress me, Kiara. I'm not trying to impress you. I'm trying to keep you from passing out during your 3 p.m. I thought that was at 4. I moved it. The client was running late, and you needed food more than you needed to sit in a conference room, silently judging someone's PowerPoint slides." He blinked. "You moved my meeting without asking. I was confident in my diagnosis. Angry plus hungry equals disaster." He stared at her a moment longer. Then he laughed. Really laughed. It wasn't loud. It wasn't showy. But it was real. It hit her like sunlight through a cracked window. "My God," he murmured, picking up the fork. "You're dangerous." She raised an eyebrow. "Because I brought you pasta. Because I don't know what to do with you." By 7:00 p.m., the office was nearly empty, but Henry was still working. And so was Kiara. She was reorganizing his schedule when she paused. "Mr. Mitchell." I can stay and help with the Harrison Project presentation if you want. That's not necessary. I don't mind. It sounds interesting, complex, ambitious. He studied her, unsure whether she was just being polite. I'm particular about how I like things organized. Show me, she said simply. So he did. For the next 3 hours, they sat shoulder to shoulder, going over the development plan, a project that combined luxury condos, affordable housing, green space, and retail access for underserved communities. This is incredible, she said, eyes scanning the floor plans. You're not just building apartments. You're building a neighborhood. That's the idea. How long have you been working on it? 2 years, maybe longer, if you count the time I spent just walking the area, imagining what it could be. There was something in his voice, hope. Maybe that startled her. She'd read about him, how ruthless he was in business, how untouchable. But the man sitting across from her now, this was a man who cared, who built with intention, who wanted to leave something behind that mattered. At 10:30, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and frowned. I should take this. He stepped away. She couldn't help but overhear fragments. I told you I was working late. Not tonight. Victoria, we talked about this. When he returned, his face was tight with tension. Everything okay? She asked. He hesitated. Personal matter. The name Victoria sat in her chest like a stone. She nodded, gathering the papers. I should probably head home. Kiara, he rarely said her name, and when he did, it held weight. Thank you for staying. For today. You're welcome. He looked at her for a long moment, then quietly added, You've been extraordinary. Her breath caught. They didn't move, didn't speak, but something passed between them in that stillness, something unspoken, something that had been building since the moment their eyes met through the glass. He stepped back first, the professional mask sliding back into place. I'll see you tomorrow. Miss Davis. Good night, Mr. Mitchell. That night, in her small Brooklyn apartment, Kiara sat in silence, exhausted, wired, changed. He was nothing like she expected, and everything she didn't know she needed to believe in again. That night, in a penthouse above Manhattan, Henry stood by the window, holding the leftover pasta she'd insisted he take home. And for the first time in months, he didn't feel alone. In just one day, she reorganized his life, and he had no idea how to go back to the way things were before she walked in. Chapter 3. Something like home. By the end of her first week, Kiara could read Henry Mitchell without him saying a word. She knew when he was frustrated, his typing grew sharper. Like keystrokes could win arguments. She knew when he was tired, his hand would rub at the back of his neck, his eyes narrowing as if even blinking was a concession. And she knew, without being told, when to push and when to just be there. He didn't say thank you often, but he noticed everything. And somehow, she felt it. Tuesday, Seifert. Thrinya. He arrived to find coffee already on his desk, black, no sugar, from Romano's, and a neatly stacked file prepared for a call he hadn't mentioned out loud. You read my calendar. You muttered it yesterday between meetings. He blinked, then nodded. Efficient. That was the closest he came to a compliment that morning. But later, when she passed his office, she heard something that made her pause. A soft humming. It was coming from her. Absent-minded, gentle. She was organizing samples for the Harrison Project and humming a Stevie Wonder tune her dad used to play when things were tight and they needed hope. She didn't notice him watching from the doorway, didn't see the way something in him softened. She just existed, unfiltered, unafraid, and it stunned him. Wednesday, during a team meeting, she sat to Henry's right and quietly took notes. But her notes weren't just transcripts. They were observations, strategic connections, follow-ups, flaws in logic that the others missed. When the meeting ended, she handed Henry a summary, 1 page, precise, clear. He read it once, then twice. This is excellent. I noticed some inconsistencies in the Patterson project timeline, she said. Voice low? The subcontractors are giving dates that don't align with the site's readiness. You noticed that either they're lying or they're disorganized. Neither's good. Henry stared at her like she'd just solved a crime. Make the calls, he said, but bring your findings to me before we act. By the end of the day, she'd uncovered a hidden delay that would have cost the company 3 months and $1, $2 million. She handed him the file with calm efficiency. He looked up from the numbers, eyes unreadable. How did you know where to look? She shrugged. I used to teach teenagers. You get pretty good at telling when someone's just saying what you want to hear. A slow smile tugged at his mouth. Useful skill. Very. Their eyes met across the desk, and for a moment, neither of them moved. It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't business. It was recognition. Thursday afternoon, Kiara found a photo tucked behind Henry's monitor. 2 young men, laughing mid-motion, arms slung around each other, like they were born to be teammates. She didn't mean to stare, but something about the unguarded joy in the photo stopped her. David, Henry said from behind her. She jumped. She hadn't heard him enter. Your brother. He nodded. 2 years younger. Smarter than me. Braver, too. She turned to face him, sensing something tender beneath his controlled tone. What happened? Car accident. 10 years ago. We'd had a fight. Doesn't matter now. It always matters. Henry looked at her then. Really looked. Most people gave him pity or platitudes. She gave him presents. Thank you, he said quietly. For what? For not saying something easy. Kiara just nodded. Loss didn't need explanations. Just space. Friday? Feinch. 00p. Henry's phone rang with news that made the air in the office shift. A city planner had raised last-minute concerns about the Harrison Project's environmental compliance concerns that had never been mentioned before. The approval meeting was Monday. A delay could kill the project. A denial would destroy it. Councilman Richards, Henry said darkly, slamming the phone down. Someone's getting paid to pretend there's a problem. She didn't ask him to calm down. She didn't offer empty reassurances. She just looked at him and said, "What do you need me to do?" He looked up, surprised. "There's nothing you can do." "Then tell me what you're going to do." "I'm going to work all weekend and try not to throw anything through this window." She nodded slowly. "Or," she said softly, "you could eat something. Sleep. Come back to it fresh on Monday." "I don't have time for sleep." "You don't have time to lose this project because you're too exhausted to think straight." For a moment, he looked like he might argue, but then he leaned back in his chair, eyes on hers. "When did you become the boss in this relationship?" "The moment you forgot to eat lunch 3 days in a row." He laughed, a low, quiet sound that did something strange to her chest. "You're very concerned about my well-being, Miss Davis." "Purely professional concern," she said, smiling. "Of course." She closed the folder and stood. "Come on. Where?" "Dinner. Real food. Real table. My treat. You're taking your billionaire boss to dinner. Consider it part of my assistant duties, keeping you from falling apart." He watched her for a long moment, then stood. "Fine, but I'm paying. We'll argue over appetizers." They ended up at a tiny Italian restaurant in Little Italy, with red checkered tablecloths and wine bottles, with candles melted down their sides. He didn't fit there, not really, but somehow he belonged there with her. They talked over pasta and bread, about teaching, about leadership, about power and what it costs. He asked about her old job. She told him about Marcus, the bright student who plagiarized his senior thesis, the powerful father who made it go away by getting her fired instead. You gave up your career for a principal, Henry said softly. I gave up my career to sleep at night. He looked at her like she was something rare. Then he told her about his father, how he'd called Henry worthless before walking out when he was 8, how he'd built everything to prove that man wrong. She reached across the table without thinking, her hand brushing his. You don't have to prove anything, she said. You just have to know your own worth. His eyes dropped to her fingers. I'm still learning how. That's okay, she whispered. We all are. When he walked her home, the air between them felt charged, fragile, electric. On the front steps, she turned to say goodnight, but he didn't move. Kiara, he said softly. Yes, what you did. Standing up for that student, losing everything to do what was right. She looked away. Maybe it was stupid. No, he said. It was brave. He stepped closer, not to kiss her, but to cup her cheek in his palm. It was the softest touch she'd ever felt, like reverence, like recognition, like home. Her phone rang. Tyler. She pulled back, breath hitching. He listened quietly as she spoke, face going pale. When she hung up, she didn't say anything, just stood there, bracing herself. What happened? He asked. His tuition, she said. They're suspending him Monday. If it's not paid. How much? She shook her head. I'm not telling you that. Kiara. No, I didn't tell you for help. I told you because I didn't want to lie. He stepped closer, voice low. I'm not helping you. I'm helping someone you love. She looked up, eyes glassy. I don't know how to accept help. Then learn, he said gently. Start with this. He'd walked her home, thinking she was temporary. But when she closed the door behind her that night, Henry Mitchell knew the truth. He didn't want a month. He wanted forever. Chapter 4, Dinner, Secrets, and the Line They Almost Crossed. Friday night in Manhattan. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual rhythm horns, sirens, laughter echoing between high-rises. But inside the dim corner of the Italian restaurant where Kiara and Henry sat, it was quiet, not silent, just still. A rare kind of stillness, the kind that only exists when two people stop pretending they don't feel what's happening. They hadn't planned dinner. It began as a break, a chance to escape the storm building over the Harrison project and the weight of the company's expectations. But somewhere, between the second glass of wine and the way Henry's eyes softened when she laughed, the air shifted, and suddenly, the restaurant didn't matter. Only she did. You don't usually do this, Kiara said, tilting her head. Dinner, candles, tablecloths, not made of spreadsheets. No, he admitted. I don't. How do you live like that? Efficiently, lonely, she corrected. Gently, he didn't flinch, but his eyes, they changed. I don't think about it. When's the last time you did something just because you wanted to, not because it served a purpose? He paused, long enough that the silence between them became its own answer. Years, he finally whispered. Maybe longer? She leaned back, studied him. That's not living. Henry, that's just existing. Existing has worked out well for me. Has it? She asked. You're powerful, respected, feared. But are you happy? That question, it landed like a punch in the chest. He looked away. I don't think about happiness. I think about progress. Achievement. Achievement. Winning. She smiled softly. That's not an answer. That's a defense mechanism. He looked at her like she had stripped him bare with a single sentence, and he didn't hate it. Their food arrived. They ate slowly, distracted. Conversation drifted. Books, music, childhood, loss, dreams too big to speak out loud. Then, Henry asked, what really happened at your last school? Her hand stilled on her fork. He waited. No pressure, no agenda, just quiet curiosity. and something deeper. Respect. She took a breath. There was a student, Marcus, brilliant, entitled, and terrified of not being perfect. He plagiarized his final paper. I caught him. What happened? I reported it. And his father was a school board donor, threatened to pull funding, claimed I had a personal bias. I was suddenly under investigation for creating a hostile environment. You were fired. Technically, my position was eliminated due to budget cuts. She looked down. I lost everything, and I'd do it again. He was silent. Then, you gave up your career to do the right thing. Sometimes doing the right thing feels like walking blindfolded into traffic. He reached across the table. His fingers brushed hers. A soft, deliberate gesture. Sometimes, it's the only thing that makes you free. Later, walking her home, the streets felt quieter than usual. Or maybe it was just the noise between them that had gone still. When they reached her building, she turned to him on the steps. "Thank you," she said softly, "for dinner, for listening, for seeing me." He smiled, just barely. "I see you more clearly than I've ever seen anyone." She looked up, eyes searching his, and suddenly, they were too close. His hand reached up to tuck a curl behind her ear. His thumb brushed her cheek. Her eyes fluttered shut. "This is dangerous," she whispered. "I know. It could ruin everything." "I know." Still, they didn't move. His other hand settled on her waist. Her fingers curled into the lapel of his coat. It wasn't a kiss yet, but it was everything that came before one. Breathless, fragile, inevitable. Until her phone rang. Tyler's ringtone. Reality came crashing back. She stepped away. "I have to take this." Henry nodded. The space between them sharp now. She turned her back and answered. He stayed close enough to hear her voice crack. "Tyler, slow down." "What? But how much?" "Monday." "Okay, I'll figure something out. I love you too." She ended the call, turned back around, her face pale, her eyes wet. What happened? School's demanding payment. If it's not in by Monday, he's suspended. Henry's eyes darkened. "How much?" "No," she said instantly. "That's not why I told you. I wasn't asking." "Kiara, I mean it." "Henry, I can't let you fix this." "Why not?" "Because then I become the girl who let a powerful man solve her life." He stepped closer, voice low. "You're not letting me. I'm choosing to help. Because Tyler matters to you." "And you," he stopped, but the words still hung in the air, "have become important to me." He finished, his voice barely a whisper. She blinked. "I don't know how to accept help." "Then learn." She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time since she'd walked into his office, her walls trembled. "Okay," she whispered, "but I'm paying you back. Every penny," he said gently. "With interest." She laughed, breath hitching. "I mean it." "So do I." He leaned down and pressed a kiss to her forehead. It was tender, protective, and completely devastating. "Go inside," he whispered. "Get some sleep." She nodded, but before she stepped away, she said, "Thank you for dinner, for everything, for reminding me what it feels like to be alive." He waited until she was safely upstairs before walking back to his car. She watched from the window, her fingers pressed to the glass. He didn't drive away right away. He just sat there, staring up at her window, like he was memorizing it, like he wasn't sure if he'd ever breathe right again without knowing she was okay. They didn't kiss, but something between them did, and in that quiet, trembling almost, they both knew everything had already changed. Chapter 5. The day the world noticed. Monday morning, the sun rose over Manhattan like it always did, indifferent and golden. But everything felt different. Kiara stepped into the Mitchell Properties lobby and knew instantly that the air had shifted. There were people loitering outside with cameras, whispers in the elevators, quick glances in her direction, and when she reached her desk, a single arrangement of first edition books sat waiting for her. No note, but she didn't need one. She touched the spine of their eyes were watching God. Her favorite, Henry Mitchell, knew, and more than that, he'd remembered. When he stepped out of his office at 9:00 and freshly pressed and already halfway through his first call, his eyes found hers immediately. Just a glance, just long enough, but it was everything. She mouthed, "Thank you." He didn't smile, but his eyes did. That morning, they were seamless. Files passed between them with barely a word. Meetings coordinated like choreography. Coffee shared like ritual. And then at 11:45 m, the world crashed through the door. Margaret appeared, with a face pale as newsprint. "Henry, Kiara, you need to see this." She handed over a tablet. A photo. Henry, Kiara, Friday night, leaving the restaurant. His hand on the small of her back. Her eyes lifted toward him in a way that left nothing to interpretation. It wasn't scandalous, but it was intimate. Too intimate. Below the photo, a headline: "Billionaire CEO's Secret Romance. Who is the woman behind the power suit?" Kiara's stomach dropped. "They were watching us," she whispered. "Someone followed us," Henry said grimly. "Paparazzi don't waste film on shadows unless someone tells them where to look." By noon, the photos were everywhere. Business sites, gossip columns, social media. People stared in the hallways. Clients canceled meetings. The board requested an urgent clarification. And by 2:00, Henry's office had become a war room. William Reed, his closest legal advisor, stood by the windows with folded arms. "You need to get in front of this," William said. "Control the narrative." "There's no narrative," Henry replied, voice tight. "I had dinner with someone I trust. End of story." "That's not how this will play. You know it." Across the room, Kiara sat silently, still, like glass about to crack. "This wasn't your fault," Henry said to her. "You did nothing wrong." She gave him a small smile. "You're wrong," she whispered. "I was the one who said yes." By evening, stock prices had dipped. The board scheduled an emergency meeting. Henry paced the office, anger curling beneath his skin. Kiara watched him calm, composed, but inside, her heart thundered like a drum. "This is your legacy," she said finally. "Mitchell Properties, everything you built. Don't let me be the thing that ruins it." "You didn't ruin anything. Perception says otherwise. Perception can go to hell." She stood. "No, Henry, this isn't just about us anymore. It's about your leadership, your investors, your name. Maybe we crossed a line." He walked toward her, stopped just inches away. His voice dropped. "I'd cross it again. Every time." She swallowed. "But at what cost?" Just then, Margaret poked her head in. "There's someone here to see you." "Who?" Henry asked. "Your mother." Jennifer Mitchell entered the room like a storm wearing pearls. Elegant, composed, calculated. "Henry," she said, "we need to talk." Her eyes flicked to Kiara, then back to her son. "I see the rumors are true. Mother, not now." "I warned you," she said coolly. "People are watching. Whispers become headlines. Headlines become reputations. And reputations are hard to fix once they've cracked." She turned to Kiara. "You're a lovely girl, and I'm sure your intentions are pure. But I won't watch my son destroy his empire because of a temporary infatuation." Kiara's hands curled into fists. She held her ground. "I don't want anything from Henry except honesty. And peace." "Peace doesn't make headlines," Jennifer snapped. "Neither does pretending to be someone you're not," Kiara replied, her voice calm but steel-edged. Henry stepped between them. "That's enough." Jennifer's eyes narrowed. "Choose wisely, Henry." And then she walked out, leaving silence and 1,000 unspoken wounds behind her. Night fell over the city, and in the dim glow of the office, Henry stood by the window again. He hadn't moved in an hour. "I should go," Kiara said softly. He didn't answer at first. Then finally, "They want me to make a statement." "What kind?" "One that says, this was temporary. A lapse in judgment. They want me to reassure the board that I'm focused, that you're no longer part of my day-to-day." She inhaled, the words stabbing like ice. "I see." I told them no. "Henry!" He turned around, eyes fierce, voice low. "You were never temporary to me. Not from the moment you walked in." She took a step closer. "This could cost you everything." He shook his head. "No. Losing you would cost me everything." And then, for the first time, she kissed him. No hesitation, no safety net, just everything she felt poured into one impossible, undeniable moment when they broke apart, breathless and trembling. He held her like a man holding on to his last bit of truth. "I don't care what they say," he whispered against her hair. "I'm not letting you go." They tried to keep it quiet, but love doesn't hide. And on the day the world noticed, they finally stopped pretending it wasn't real. Chapter 6. The Ultimatum. It was past midnight. The Mitchell Properties boardroom had never felt colder. 12 men and women stared across the polished mahogany table, their expressions a mixture of concern, calculation, and disappointment. At the head of it sat Henry Mitchell. Tie loosened, jaw clenched, hands steepled. He had just been handed the company's future and its conditions. End the relationship. Issue a statement of regret. Reinstate ties with Victoria Edwards publicly and reaffirm your commitment to the company's image. Or step down as CEO, effective immediately. Henry had built this empire from nothing. Boardroom by boardroom, deal by deal, brick by brick. He remembered nights sleeping on a mattress on the floor, the smell of his mother's tired hands after her third shift, the promises he'd made to himself in the quiet. No one would ever have the power to make him feel small again. No one would ever control his worth. And now, they were asking him to sacrifice the only real thing in his life for the sake of perception. Back in his office, Kiara waited. She sat in his chair, knees pulled to her chest, her heart pounding in rhythm with the clock on the wall. She didn't need to hear the vote. She already knew the answer. When Henry returned, he looked hollow, as if every part of him had been dissected, weighed, and measured. She stood. "What did they say?" His voice was flat. "They gave me an ultimatum." She nodded. "And what did you choose?" Silence. Then he whispered, "You?" Her knees nearly buckled. "No," she said, stepping back. "Henry, this is your life, your company. This company was built by me, but it's not who I am. Not anymore. You can't just walk away." "I'm not walking away." He stepped toward her, voice breaking. "I'm walking toward something that finally matters." Tears filled her eyes. "This could destroy your legacy." He touched her face gently. "Then I'll build another one that's built on truth, not control." Outside, the rain started again. Not a storm this time, just steady, quiet drops against the glass. The kind of rain that washes things clean. Hours later, at the emergency board meeting, Henry stood in the same spot where he'd once promised exponential growth, national expansion, unshakable strategy. This time, he spoke about love, about integrity, about choosing a life that made him feel whole instead of just powerful. They didn't clap. They didn't argue. They just stared as he slid the resignation letter across the table and walked away. Kiara waited for him downstairs, umbrella in hand, tears already on her cheeks before he even reached her. "You did it," she said. "No," he replied softly. "We did." She reached for his hand. He pulled her into a kiss right there on the marble floor, in front of everyone. Like the final chapter of a story, neither of them were afraid to tell anymore. They left the building hand in hand. He had no plan. She had no job. They had each other, and sometimes that's all you need to begin again. Power built his name, but love built his life. And when the world demanded a choice, he chose her. Chapter 7. The New Blueprint. Brooklyn. 2 weeks later, the office smelled like fresh paint and roasted coffee. Sunlight poured through tall windows that faced the street, casting gold over boxes still waiting to be unpacked. There was no corner office, no secretaries in glass cubicles, no skyline view, but Henry Mitchell stood at the front desk and exhaled like he could finally breathe. Mitchell and Davis Consulting. The modest sign read, 2 names, 1 future. Behind him, Kiara knelt beside a box of files, her curls pulled into a loose bun, reading glasses sliding down her nose. She looked up and grinned. You realize our break room is just a Keurig and 2 mugs. He smiled back, and I love it. The idea had come in pieces, over late-night dinners, long subway rides, and moments when their hands accidentally touched, and neither of them pulled away. A company built not for domination, but for restoration, helping small business owners navigate real estate chaos, helping nonprofits negotiate space, helping people like her father, like Tyler, like all the families they'd known growing up, not get left behind. It wasn't flashy, but it was theirs. Their first client was a single mother of 3, trying to keep her community daycare from being bulldozed by a luxury condo project. Kiara took the call, listened for 45 minutes, took notes with a fierceness Henry hadn't seen in boardrooms. And when she hung up, he watched her eyes fill with something that looked a lot like purpose. She's not just trying to keep her job, Kiara whispered. She's trying to keep a safe space for 30 kids who have nowhere else to go. Henry nodded. Then, let's help her. That afternoon, they worked side by side at their shared desk. No hierarchy, no walls. He mapped zoning loopholes. She drafted community appeal strategies. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and Henry found himself smiling for no reason as he watched her scribble margin notes with pink highlighter and talk through strategy like she'd been doing this her whole life. You're radiant when you're solving problems, he said suddenly. She paused. Radiant. Brilliant. Lit from within. She turned pink. He leaned in closer. I'd forgotten what this feels like, he whispered, waking up excited, going to sleep proud. You didn't lose your soul, she said. You just hid it behind a corner office for too long. Later that week, Henry brought in a second desk. Kiara frowned when she saw it. I thought we agreed 1 desk, shared space, co-founders. I just thought maybe we each deserved our own place too. She smiled. Your growth arc is showing. Mitchell. That Friday, Tyler visited the office. He wandered through the space, sketchbook in hand, shaking his head. This is wild. You guys actually built it. We're just getting started, Henry said. Tyler looked from one to the other. You're different, he said to his sister. Lighter. I think I finally get to be all of me, she replied softly. Not just the version people find useful. He turned to Henry. Thank you. Henry's brows lifted. For what? For not just loving her, Tyler said, but seeing her. That night, they closed the office late. The street outside was quiet. Their desks were messy with half-eaten pizza, paper sketches, and dreams too big for blueprints. Henry turned off the lights, but before they left, he paused beside her. I like who I am here, he said. With you, you always were this person, she replied. You just needed somewhere safe to become him. They left behind steel towers and glass walls and built something softer, more honest, a future not of empires, but of impact. And it all began with one blueprint drawn not on paper, but in trust. Chapter 8. The Woman behind the war. It began with an email, subject line, urgent, interview request. The real Kiara Davis. Kiara stared at the screen, her hands frozen on the keyboard. She didn't need to read the body. She knew what it said. They weren't done with her. Ever since Henry stepped down, whispers had swirled louder than truth. The gold digger who ruined a billionaire. The assistant who seduced her way to power. The former teacher who couldn't hold a job, but could hold a man. It wasn't just cruel, it was personal. Because in every headline, she saw not just herself, but every woman who'd ever been told she was too loud, too bold, too much, and never enough. Henry found her that night in the office kitchen, staring into a mug of untouched tea. He knew that look. It was the look of someone backed into a corner. What happened? He asked gently. She turned the screen to face him. He read the headline. His jaw clenched. "We can sue." She shook her head. "They're not saying anything legally false, just spinning reality into entertainment. I'll handle it." "No," she said. "I will." The next morning, Kiara Davis walked into a live radio interview, wearing a navy dress, small earrings, and the unshakable clarity of a woman who had nothing to prove but everything to reclaim. The host's smile was tight. "Some say you manipulated one of Manhattan's most powerful CEOs into walking away from his own empire. What do you say to that?" Kiara leaned forward. "I say, thank you." The host blinked. "Thank you. Because questions like that remind me of how important it is that I show up. As a woman, as a professional, and as someone who doesn't owe anyone a version of myself that makes them feel safer." The room went still. Kiara continued. "Henry Mitchell didn't walk away from power. He walked toward purpose. We built something together. And not because I'm a seductress or a strategy, but because I'm brilliant, because I'm principled, because I'm enough." A pause. Then she smiled. "And because he knows that." The clip went viral by lunchtime. Not because it was loud, but because it was honest. 1,000 women sent messages. "Thank you for saying what I couldn't. You reminded me I'm more than what they see." They underestimated the wrong girl. That evening, Kiara came home to a candlelit dinner and a kitchen that smelled like slightly overcooked pasta. Henry stood there, an apron over his dress shirt, a sheepish smile on his face. "I tried," he said, holding up a blackened garlic bread. She laughed. The kind of laugh that came from the belly and healed things on its way out. "You're amazing," he whispered, pulling her close. "What you did today, I just told the truth. That's the hardest thing to do, especially when the world wants you to apologize for existing." She leaned her head against his chest. "I spent so long trying not to be threatening, not too ambitious, not too outspoken, and it still wasn't enough. So I figured." She paused, smiling. "Why not be everything?" His arms tightened around her. "You've always been everything." Later that night, she lay awake in bed, watching the ceiling, his hand resting gently on her hip. "I didn't change you," she whispered. "No," he said sleepily. "You reminded me who I was before I got scared." They called her the woman who cost him everything. But they were wrong. She was the woman who reminded him what was worth fighting for. Not money, not titles, but love, integrity, and finally himself. Chapter 9. The Rooftop Promise. The rooftop was nothing like the one at Mitchell Properties. No sweeping skyline, no glass railings or curated plant installations, just cracked concrete, a few string lights, and the faint hum of the city below. But to Henry, it felt more real than any view he'd ever stood before, because she was there, wrapped in his jacket, curls pulled loose by the wind, staring out over Brooklyn like it was hers to protect. It was the anniversary of the night everything changed. Fifrchen, the dinner, the almost kiss, the call from Tyler, the moment he realized he'd rather lose his empire than lose her. They hadn't planned to mark it, but somehow they both ended up on that rooftop, like memory had summoned them. "Remember this night last year?" Kiara asked softly. He nodded. "I remember everything." She turned toward him, face lit by the soft string lights overhead. "I was terrified," she whispered, "of wanting too much, of being seen, of what would happen if you saw all of me." "I did," he said, "and I never wanted to look away." She walked to the edge of the rooftop, looking down at the quiet street below. "People still talk, you know," she said. "Some think I ruined you. Others think I saved you. And what do you think?" She turned back to him. "I think we saved each other." He smiled, but there was something in his eyes, something heavy. "What is it?" she asked. Stepping closer, he hesitated. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small velvet box. She froze. "Henry, it's not what you think," he said quickly. "Not yet." He opened the box. Inside was a simple gold ring, elegant, quiet, a single diamond, no fanfare. "I bought it a month after I left the company," he said, "but I wasn't ready." "You weren't ready. We were still healing." She said nothing, just stared at it. "And I don't want to rush," he added, "not because the world is watching or the story would be beautiful. I want this when it feels like us, like truth." He looked up at her, voice trembling slightly. "So I'm not asking you to marry me tonight, Kiara." She blinked. "You're not?" "I'm asking you to promise me," he said, stepping forward, "that when the day comes, when you're ready, it'll be me." A pause. Then, "Promise me you'll still believe in us." She let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. Her hands reached for the box, not to take the ring, just to hold it with him. "I promise," she said, "with all of me." They stood there, the wind moving around them like music, not kissing, not crying, just two people who had found something rare in a world full of noise, a quiet certainty. Later, when they went back inside, she placed the box on the bookshelf next to her father's photo, not hidden, not displayed, just waiting. It wasn't a proposal, it was a promise. And sometimes, that's the beginning of forever. Chapter 10. The forever they chose. 1 year later, the garden smelled like jasmine and rain-soaked wood. There were no chandeliers, no 5-tiered cakes, no violin quartets, just friends, family, string lights swaying in the summer breeze. And Henry Mitchell, standing at the end of a rose-lined aisle, his heart pounding beneath a gray linen suit, hands trembling, not from fear, but from reverence. Because this was the moment that no boardroom could have bought. Kiara stepped into the garden like the sun had chosen her skin as its canvas. Her gown was simple, ivory, satin, no diamonds, no veil, just her. And as she walked down the aisle, her eyes never left his, not even for a second. She was steady, like she knew exactly what she was walking into. Dr. James Washington gave her away with mist in his eyes, and a smile so proud it could have stopped traffic. "You sure about this?" he whispered, half teasing. Kiara grinned. "Completely." He kissed her forehead. "Then go. Be happy. You've earned it." Their vows weren't rehearsed. They were lived, spoken from hearts that had already known what it meant to break and choose love anyway. "Henry, you walked into my office like a storm and became my calm. You didn't ask to fix me. You reminded me I wasn't broken. You taught me that love isn't about who's strong. It's about who's safe. And with you, I finally stopped surviving. I started living. Kiara, you gave up the world for me. But the truth is, I never wanted the world. I just wanted you, not the CEO, not the legacy, just the man who made me feel seen, heard, and completely, irrevocably home." They kissed under the willow tree as soft rain began to fall just enough to make people laugh and cover their champagne. But Kiara and Henry, they didn't move. Because what's a little rain when you've already survived a storm? Later that night, they danced barefoot under the stars. Tyler played a slow jazz tune from his phone. Margaret cried quietly into her napkin. Jennifer Mitchell, even, she smiled, watching her son hold his wife like she was something sacred. Because she was at midnight, they slipped away to the rooftop of their new apartment, the one with creaky stairs, a leaky faucet, and windows that opened to the Brooklyn sky. They sat side by side, backs against the brick wall, a blanket around their shoulders. No talk of companies, no talk of what they'd lost, just soft, stolen laughter between sips of cheap wine. And then Henry whispered, "You still glad you said yes?" Kiara leaned her head on his shoulder. "I didn't say yes to a man with money, or power, or plans. I said yes to a man who knelt on a rooftop with a promise in his hands." He turned to her, his voice caught. "And now, she said softly, "I choose you." Again, and again, and again. They didn't choose the easiest path. They chose each other, not for a season, not for survival, but for something greater, for forever. "Let's finish strong," whispered like a memory. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it shows up as a woman walking into a stranger's office with trembling hands and a resume filled with heartbreak. Sometimes it's a man who has everything except peace, staring out a 42nd floor window, wondering if success means anything without someone to share it with. Henry Mitchell had the world until he realized what he truly needed was a home. And Kiara Davis, she didn't come to be saved. She came to remind him what it meant to be human again. They weren't perfect. They were healing. Two people brave enough to admit they were scared, but braver still to choose love anyway. Because love like that, it builds something stronger than empires. It builds forever. If this story moved you, if you've ever had to choose between what the world expects and what your heart knows is right, tell us in the comments what part of Kiara and Henry's story felt like it was written for you. And if you believe that real love takes courage, hit the like button so this story reaches someone who needs it today. Subscribe to Dear Love Diaries for more life-changing love stories like this. Tomorrow's story, it's even deeper. It asks what happens when the man who broke you is the only one who can save you. See you there. We'll be waiting. Tell us, what are your thoughts on this story? Leave a comment and rate it from 0 to 10. Make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell to follow all our latest stories. And don't miss out. Click here to watch more now.